Former Trump campaign CEO and one-time Trump White House advisor Steve Bannon says he won't comply with a congressional subpoena. The chairman of the House Select Committee investigating the insurrection this afternoon says they will swiftly consider holding Bannon and potentially other individuals in contempt of Congress now. Joining us now for the very latest, ABC News Chief Washington Correspondent John Karl, also former Trump DOJ official, and ABC News contributor Sarah Eisinger. Sarah, let's start with you and talk about Bannon. He wasn't even working at the White House on January 6th. He was fired in 2017. Can he ignore this subpoena and somehow be protected by executive privilege?
It's an unprecedented question. Presidents have been asserting their rights against Congress since Jefferson, but it's really not until the Nixon administration that we have courts getting involved. And so while executive privilege is meant to protect presidents, allowing them to have confidential conversations with their aides, it's actually never been discussed whether that aide needs to be on payroll or is simply someone that the president relies on, Steve Bannon being the latter, but definitely not the former. Now, when Don McGahn was subpoenaed just a couple of years ago, he claimed that he had absolute immunity as a former executive aide. Harriet Miers did something similar back in 2007. Both times, Congress and McGahn and Miers reached a type of accommodation where they figured it out. I think that is less likely here, which could make for a very interesting legal case.
And John, is this what the former president actually wants? And how is the Biden administration responding to attempts by Trump to withhold documents in the name of executive privilege?
Well, it's interesting. Trump has put out a word through a spokesperson saying that he would fight to protect executive privilege. That seemed to be an indication that he was going to try to block any of his former aides from testifying. And now we see the committee saying that Kash Patel, the former chief of staff at the Pentagon, and Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff at the White House, are both engaging with the committee. So what does Trump want? Totally unclear, Kira, and this is not unusual in this situation. If you remember, during the Mueller investigation, Trump's lawyers fought mightily to keep Donald Trump from testifying, while Donald Trump said repeatedly, including several times to me in person, that he was more than willing to talk to Mueller because he had nothing to hide. And on cue, earlier this week, Donald Trump gave an interview just a few days ago, where he said, he doesn't really seem to have a problem. We did nothing wrong. Why not go in and say we did nothing wrong? But that said, I think it's clear that his legal team is trying to prevent this testimony. And you ask another very good question, which is how does Biden approach this? And remember, the principle of executive privilege is something that has been jealously defended, as Sarah just talked about, by numerous previous presidents. So on one hand, Biden has absolutely no interest whatsoever, and the Biden administration has no interest whatsoever in protecting Donald Trump from inquiry in terms of his actions on January 6th.
Hey, John.
But they do have an interest in protecting executive privilege.
So, John, apparently the White House, we're getting word now, has just blocked an attempt by former President Trump to keep Trump White House records away from the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack. So this is according to a letter just obtained by ABC News. What do you think? How big of a move is that?
I think that's a very important step and a very significant step in this process, because think about, Kira, what they are trying to find out. They are trying to find out one of the major mysteries is what the heck was Donald Trump up to during the hours that insurrection was underway. Now, there are documents, not just individuals talking who were with the president, but there are also some important documents that could help shed some light on that. I'll give you one very specific one that I know that I am very interested to see, and I think should be made public. As you recall, on January 6th, Donald Trump released a video encouraging his supporters who were rioting in the Capitol to go home. It was a video where he also praised their actions and said, "We love you very much." But here's what I have learned in my reporting, and others have as well. Donald Trump made several versions of that video. That was the final version. The earlier versions were deemed unacceptable because he didn't, this is what I've learned in my reporting, he didn't tell them to go home. So when you look at the video that he made, where he's actually praising, seems to be praising the rioters, saying, "We love you very much," that was acceptable in some way, and it got out, and of course it was roundly condemned. I mean, what was he saying in those two previous versions? Those videos were shot by videographers working as U.S. government employees in the White House video operation. So
and John,
those
I remember
videos
sources
theoretically
telling
would be around.
us. Well, and don't you remember sources were telling us, because I remember this very clearly, that those around him were getting frustrated that he wasn't coming forward and just and being direct and saying, "We got to put a stop to this now. This is wrong."
Yeah. So some of those people, that, as we've reported, Kira, were in person, telling him, going in and out of that room. For most of this time, he was in that dining room right off the Oval Office watching television. But he was also getting phone calls. And I know of some people who tried to call him and couldn't get through. Chris Christie's one. Chris Christie said that he tried to call through the White House, through the president's secretary, and through the president's cell phone. Well, wouldn't it be interesting to see those call records? Who else was trying to get through to the president? Who else did get through to the president? And what light can they shed on his activities during those few critical hours when the Capitol was overrun by supporters of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump was refusing to do anything at all to stop them?
Right. And Sarah, feel free to chime in if you want on the news that we just learned. But also, I just wanted to follow up, as John mentioned, that other key advisors around Trump, Mark Meadows, Kash Patel, as John mentioned, are cooperating apparently with the investigation. Do you know of anyone else that is cooperating? And does the stonewalling that's taking place, will it hamstring this investigation in any way?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what comes of that cooperation. Of course, what they've really mean by that is that they've opened lines of communication. In the past, presidential advisors have agreed to talk about certain types of conversations they may have overheard, but not advice that they had given to the president, sort of core executive privilege. And so we'll see whether they can reach that accommodation with Meadows and Patel. What you were saying about the documents now, the testimony is actually a different part of executive privilege than document executive privilege. Those documents aren't kept by the Biden administration. They're kept in the National Archives. And so when the National Archives says they are not going to assert executive privilege against Congress in terms of turning over those documents, that's what sets up then the ability of Donald Trump's legal team to sue the National Archives to prevent them from turning over those documents. It'll be interesting in the next few days. Maybe it'll take a week or two to see whether they do in fact file that lawsuit, as I suspect that they will.
All right, we'll follow that for sure. Also, another bombshell I want to ask you both about, John, in the Trump world this week, this sweeping Senate report that detailed Trump's attempt to use the Department of Justice, and of course, Sarah, I'm going to get you to weigh on this as well, to overturn the election. And then emerging as a key player here, Jeffrey Clark. Who is Jeffrey Clark? Well, he was the acting head of DOJ's civil division, who apparently was pushing the Justice Department, to echo Trump's voter fraud claims. What did we learn about that, and what stopped him, John?
Well, the broad outlines of this story have been reported, but we got detailed information in terms of emails and also interviews with former acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen, and also with the former Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue. But it's a fascinating story, Kara, because as you know, Donald Trump first tried to get his Attorney General, Bill Barr, to use the power of the Justice Department to overturn the election. He almost didn't care how, but to use the power, get out there, say there was widespread fraud. He wanted voting machines seized in the key states. He wanted state legislators to be pressured to undo Biden's election victory in several key states, especially the state of Georgia. So Barr refused. Barr said there was no fraud, and then Barr left on December 14th. In comes acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen. Rosen also gets pressured immensely by Donald Trump to get in there and to, as Rosen says to the committee, he basically wanted him to flip a switch and undo the election by saying there was fraud. And Rosen had to tell Donald Trump that you can't do that. So Rosen is there. In the last days, the centerpiece of all of this is this guy you mentioned, Jeffrey Clark, who has been described to me by his colleagues over at Justice as a dorky environmental lawyer. He's somebody most people had never heard of. He was the head of the environmental division and acting head of the civil division. He's not somebody anybody really know, anybody really knew. I'm sure Sarah, because Sarah knows everybody at the Justice Department.
Trust me, we're going to get Sarah to weigh in.
But this guy Jeffrey Clark, who had no experience in election law and had never been a particularly high-profile political figure in any way, had this. He was the one person in the senior ranks of the Justice Department who was raising his hand and saying, "Mr. President, I'll do it. I'll do it all." And he had crazy theories. He thought that the wireless thermostats that were being used in the building where they were counting ballots in Fulton County, Georgia, that those wireless thermostats, which are made by a company owned by Google but made in China, he thought that those thermostats were being used to control the voting machines to flip votes. I mean, crazy stuff. And Donald Trump made a decision in early January to install him, to fire Rosen, and to install this guy, the dorky environmental lawyer, if you will, as the acting attorney general. That would do that. And what stopped him, quite simply, Kira, is everybody at the Justice Department, every senior official at the Justice Department in the top ranks, got together and said they would resign if Rosen was fired and Clark was put in. And then the committee reports and reveals that the White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, and his deputy also said they would resign. So Donald Trump would have been left with one dorky environmental lawyer promising to turning over the election, but not really all the levers of the Justice Department. And he ultimately backed down.
Sarah's got to weigh in. I mean, is that fair? Dorky environmentalist. I mean, really, nobody knew who Jeffrey Clark was until now, and poor guy's now being branded as a major dork. But John just lays it out there how it is.
Hey, it's just it.
But that's okay, But Sarah, seriously, did you know him, and were you surprised by Jeffrey Clark's involvement here, and how he tried to push DOJ apparently into going along with Trump's scheme?
Well, as usual, John Carl's reporting is spot on and nothing but the facts, if colorful, perhaps. It's interesting when his name first came up in this idea that there was this person at the Department of Justice trying to overturn the election in collusion with the White House, plotting against senior members of the department. I did not really remember who that was. I was in the majority of high-level meetings with the Attorney General. I was a senior advisor to him, senior counselor to the Deputy Attorney General, and I had to go back and look at pictures of the political appointees, and I did notice something interesting. First of all, it reminded me who he was. But second of all, in all of those pictures, I had one of the outtakes as well. Each time, he maneuvered himself right next to the Attorney General, which is interesting as someone who was not really a member of that senior team. I think it speaks very well on behalf of the institution, on the Department of Justice. There's a moment in that report that John didn't mention where Clark threatens the acting Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General and says, "The president has decided that I'm going to replace you. And unless you go along with this, I'm going to do that. If you go along with it, I will turn down your job." An incredible thing to say to someone's face. And of course, that is then when those senior department officials, as well as some White House officials, go to the White House in just an unprecedented meeting and say, we will all leave. And that was heartening to me. That was a really proud moment, I think, for the department.
Yeah, and Kira, if I can jump in, Sarah's exactly right. I mean, this showed, look, Donald Trump was trying to pull off a coup. He was trying to steal the election. He was trying to use the power of the Justice Department, which is considerable, to act in a way that was illegal. And all of these associate attorneys general, all these senior officials, the head of the the head of the antitrust division, the head of the Office of Legal Counsel, all of these senior officials appointed by Donald Trump came together, and every single one of them, except for Jeffrey Clark, said that this was entirely unacceptable, and they would resign. It was an extraordinary moment, and it may have stopped what happened on January 6th from being much, much, much worse, from this entire episode, from being a true constitutional crisis with no roadmap out.
And can you believe we are talking about the Iowa State Fair this weekend, where Democrats will be out talking elections and Trump will be rallying his supporters. It's going to be very interesting to watch from now for, oh boy, months to come. John Carl and Sarah, yes. Oh boy is right. Sarah Isgur, it's nice to have you on board here at ABC. Thanks, guys, for a very enlightening discussion.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.